Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is 7th period with my wonderful AP biologist. Say hi.
Hi.
And we're getting ready for our first unit exam. And 50% of your exam is going to be what? Essay. And 50% is going to be multiple choice. So the best way to prepare for the multiple choice would be doing what? How do you study? If you're going to take a multiple choice test, what would be a good way to study for it? Okay, look at the notes. Good. Study. Practice test. What kind of practice tests? What? Right. What kind of practice tests? Multiple choice practice tests, you think? Yes. If half of your test is going to be multiple choice, take a lot of multiple choice practice tests. You can get those at the back of your chapter. You can get them with your online textbook. Okay, take practice tests to get ready for it. Multiple choice. For the essay, you're going to want to practice what? Writing. Now, on the writing part, that's what we're focused on right now. There's the questions that I told you you should be prepared for, and we will go over those. And then let's try to guess about some other things I might ask, and we can go over those. Right? Because this is just telling you, perfect, right there, babe, thank you. This is just telling you, hey, I would know this. But there's more out there in those 4 chapters than what's right here. Okay, so let's start with the obvious one first, water. Okay, so the first thing on here, you have to explain polar covalent bonding in a water molecule. Bye, sweetheart. So you need to explain what a polar covalent bond is. What are all the parts of that you think you need to explain? What are some key words there? Tell me.
Polar.
Okay, but I'd start with something else first. What? Okay, I would explain what a covalent bond is, as opposed to a ionic bond, right? A covalent bond is when you're sharing a pair of electrons. Then, once you've explained what a covalent bond is, then you can talk about what a polar covalent bond is. Okay, but first you have to tell me what a covalent bond is. A polar covalent bond is when you share the electrons what? Unequally. So somebody has a stronger pull on the electrons than another. And in this case, who has a stronger hold on those electrons? Oxygen. So in a polar covalent bond, you've got oxygen bound with hydrogens, but the oxygen has a stronger hold on those electrons. So as a result, oxygen, it's not got a charge, but it's got a partial negative charge, and the hydrogens have a partial what? Negative. Positive. Okay, oxygens have a partial negative, and hydrogens have a partial positive. That sets up, do you guys see my bee sting? It feels like it's getting bigger from the marks.
It is.
I want to cut my arm off. Okay, that may be a little extreme. Okay, so once you've set that part up, then you can explain about a hydrogen bond. So what is a hydrogen bond? That's the first thing you'd probably want to tell me. What is a hydrogen bond? Two atoms? Think again. 2 molecules, yeah. And that's where you have a partial negative that is attracted to a partial positive. It's not a full-on ionic bond. They are not sharing any electrons. It is a weak bond. And when you have water molecules and you have multiple, let's see if it will, no. Can I copy this drawing? No, I cannot. Hang on. Oh, hang on. All right, I'll get this. Lock in place. Okay, so if I have one water molecule and I end up having several, where's clone? Do you see it?
Yeah,
it's not letting me. Okay, if I have multiple water molecules, then I'm going to set them all up with the partial negatives being attracted to the partial, oh my gosh, stop it, the partial positives, and then your hydrogen bond is across like this. And every water molecule will have a hydrogen bond with one or more other water molecules. And And all of those, what do we call that? What's that property? It starts with a C. Cohesion. One water molecule with another water molecule. Okay, then C, it says, explain how the unique properties, explain 3 of the unique properties of water that are the result of hydrogen bonding. Did I give you more than 3? Yeah, I gave you several. What's the one I said I would not use on an exam? Surface tension. I wouldn't give that one. But what are some ones you could discuss at that point? High heat capacity. And you wouldn't just say high heat capacity. You would give me the name like she did. That's the first step. But then you would explain, why does water have a high heat capacity? Because it can hold a lot of energy in its what? Hydrogen bonds. What's another one that you talked about besides high heat capacity? Okay, so I would encourage you, because it sounds like you haven't written that yet, to go look at your notes and look at the properties of water that we discussed and be able to explain to me, because I'm not going to write your essay for you. This would be your job, and it should have already been written by this point. Explain to me a property of water and then explain how that relates to hydrogen bonding, how water takes care of that, okay? So that would be essay number 1. Look to the person next to you and say, should you have already written this one and did you write it yet? Ask them. All right, now come back to me once again. So that is your essay number 1. Essay number 2 says, discuss the biological importance, so why is it important, and molecular structure, how is it built, of each of these important organic molecules in relation to what? Cellular structure and function in plants and animals. So you are telling me, what is this made out of, and why is it important? If you can identify it in a cell, remember how we've gone through the cell? You could do it there as well. We have spent quite a bit of time in a whole review session just doing that, right? That was our review session yesterday. So you would tell me things like carbohydrates are built out of what? Sugars, okay? So what are some ways that sugars are important to organisms? You could say what? What are the 2 big things when we talked about it?
Energy and structure.
Yeah, energy and structure. We talked about simple sugars or quick energy. We talked also about disaccharides. We talked about polysaccharides. And in animals, we store the energy as what? And in animals, we store it as glycogen. In plants, we store it as starch. We also talked about structural importance. Don't celebrate your ignorance. We also talked about structural importance. What was some structural importance? Cellulose, plant cell walls. What else? Chitin. Now, we talked about cells specifically today, right? And we talked about its importance. Where did we see carbohydrates today in our cells? Carbohydrate side chains, right? Important in cell-to-cell recognition. Glycolipids and glycoproteins, right? So we saw it right there. All right, how about proteins? Oh, should you be able to draw a simple picture of the monomer? Yes. Have we drawn those? Have we looked at it? Yes. Okay, proteins, what are they built out of? Amino acids. Do you think I expect you to draw an amino acid? Yes. Okay, that's the one I said you have got to know the carboxyl group, the amino group. You have to be able to draw it. Verbatim, no mistakes. Central carbon, H, R, then you have off that central carbon you have a nitrogen with 2 hydrogens, and then the carboxyl group, C double bond OOH. Yes?
Will we have to know how to draw all 20 amino acids like the
For sure. No. Yeah, but what you would tell me when you drew your amino acid, right, with your H, your R, you would tell me that there were 20 different R groups. Okay, you would do C double bond O OH. You would call that your what group? Carboxyl. You would tell me that there are 20 different R groups. There could be variations. You would explain that to me. You would tell me that this is called the what group?
Amino group.
Yep, this is the amino group. And that's obviously hydrogen. So you have 20 variations, so you have 20 different amino acids. Okay, and you would label all of that. Okay, and you have that, and it's in your notes. I've seen it in your group shared notes. Okay, when you talk about proteins, why are proteins important? Remember there was a whole list of things that proteins do, from enzymes to cellular messengers to transportation. Remember everything we talked about. There's a whole list of them in your notes. I would review that. What did we talk about today where it was important? Where were proteins important today?
Proteins by the phosphorus cell membrane.
Where in the cell membranes? What did they act as? Carriers and channels across the cell membrane. Okay, so you want to reference it on the whole from your notes and then apply it also to today as well and what you learned about cell membranes. Okay, so then lipids. What would you tell me about lipids? Okay, so you have two categories here. What are they? Steroids. And what else? Fats. Good. So when you talk about steroids, what would you talk to me about? 4 fused rings. Okay, and it could be a very simple picture that you draw. And then you would talk to me about where you see steroids. Where did we see it originally? Where did we see it today? Steroids are used as what? Starts with an H. Hormones. And then where did we see a steroid today? Cholesterol. And what did cholesterol do for the cell membrane? With its fluidity, right? When it gets it too hot, it kind of holds it together. And when it gets too cold, it prevents it from freezing. So you have your notes that you had when I introduced it in examples there. And then you have notes as well in the cell membrane. That can just help you when you're trying to support I'm just giving it to you as one more thing. You can, as we build on one unit on another, you'll start to incorporate in your essays from several different units. Do you have to include everything you learned about membranes today? No, you do not. Could you use that to support your point, though, in your essay? Sure, because you already know about it. So if you want to use that to support it. Okay, fats. What are fats built out of? Glycerol and what?
3 fatty acids.
3 fatty acid chains. Okay? Could you tell me about the difference between saturated and unsaturated?
There's a kink in the
Yeah, so you would describe all of those different things. And you would tell me why there's a kink, right? Because there's double bonds. And you would tell me as a result it's liquid at room temperature and not a solid. And you would tell me you would find it in a plant, right? If it was unsaturated. Where do we see fats today? And they obviously help us with insulation and keeping us warm, but where did we see it today? We saw fats in the phospholipid bilayer, and that was in your notes when you got it as well. Remember, we removed one of the fatty acid chains and replaced it with a phosphate. Those were in your original notes on the 4 important organic molecules. Okay, and then that brings us to nucleic acids. What are nucleic acids built out of? Nucleotides. And you would tell me what a nucleotide is. What is a nucleotide? Okay, so you have a nitrogenous base. You have what else? A 5-carbon sugar. Okay. And what else do you have? Yeah, a phosphate group. Nitrogenous base, a sugar, and a phosphate. And you could tell me that how many different bases are there? How many options do you have on bases? 5. What are they? Adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. And in RNA you have uracil. How many options do we have on sugars? 2. What are they?
Ribose and dibose.
Yeah, deoxyribose and ribose. How many options do we have on phosphate groups? 1. Phosphate. Okay. And then you could talk to me about examples. You could talk about DNA, and you could tell me it's the code book. You could talk about RNA, and you could mention that it brings information. You use it to build proteins, something along those lines. Yes?
On the tests, approximately how long are the essays?
Some of them are really short, some of them are longer. So they're not, and it's the same thing when you take your real AP exam. You'll start off with really long essays that are worth like 10 points each, and then there'll be fewer and fewer, and at the end you have really short ones. So it could be any combination of that. Yes?
And can you tell us how many essays are being said?
I don't. But generally speaking, you could have anywhere, you could have 4, you could have 6, you could have 8, but if you had 8, there's probably really short ones in there. Yes?
So based on what you told us, Joe, you give us, like, you decide how much space you give us per
Yeah.
answer?
I give you space, and you should be able to answer it within that space. Yeah. And if you can't, then you're not really confident in what you're talking about. Okay? That's scary, Miss Lynn. Yes?
So did you say for nucleic acids to mention ATP?
You could mention ATP, yeah, absolutely, because it's one of your nucleic acids, DNA, RNA, and ATP, absolutely. Okay, so these are the obvious questions I could ask, yes? So now let's talk about things I didn't put on there, but possibly could be asked. So why don't we start with chapter 1? What was chapter 1 about? Organization of life. Atom, molecule, organelle, cell, tissue, organ system, right? Organism, population, community, ecosystem, biosphere, right? And what else did we talk about?
Chi-squared.
We talked about chi-squared in there, and we talked about chi-squared when we talked about what is that whole under the umbrella of what? Scientific method. Exactly. So you want to make sure you understand the steps of the scientific methods, okay? What do you have to do first in the scientific method? You ask a driving what? Question. Then you find some background, right? Then what do you do after you have your background? You make a hypothesis. And you're going to write your hypothesis as a what? If, then, because, right? If, then, because on your hypothesis. What else are you going to have besides your hypothesis? Variables. What are your 2 variables? Independent and dependent variables. Could you identify that? What's an independent variable? What's a dependent variable? Remember, for dependent variable, that's data. Remember that little machine I gave you, independent variable? You put in like what you choose is your independent variable, and then the data that comes out, that's the dependent variable, right? And what else do you need in your when you talk about scientific method? You need controls. Your basis of comparison. You need your constants. Then what do you make? Procedures, and in our case we call it a flow chart. And in our case that flow chart is going to be very detailed. What's it going to have in it? Pictures. Good. What follows our flow chart? We have our data table where you record your data. What goes underneath your data table? Calculations, and you derive calculations. Then what comes? A graph of that data. Then what comes? Right? And in your analysis, what do? We write a claim, evidence, reason, error. Now, that brings us to what we heard just a few minutes ago. When we make a claim, we back it up with our evidence from our data, right? And then we want to know, is it or What do we use there? No. Is it significant or isn't it significant, right? So when we introduced whether something's significant or insignificant, we brought up the idea of different types of hypotheses, right? So we said there was a research hypothesis and a null hypothesis. So on your null hypothesis, you're saying whatever variations we have in our experiment, it is all due to what? Chance. Exactly. This was absolutely expected. I didn't think there would be any differences at all, and it's all due to chance. When I have a research hypothesis or my alternative hypothesis, I'm saying this occurred, and I'm predicting like this data is a result of the connection between those two. When I watered my plants more, they grew more. Okay, if I'm doing a null hypothesis, I'm saying The amount of water you give a plant doesn't have anything to do with growth. Okay, that would be your null hypothesis. That one happened to grow more, it was totally due to chance. Okay, yeah, this one withered and died, I expected that. Okay, it's total random chance. So then, what we do is we take our data and we find out if it's expected or not. And that's when we use the what? Chi-square. How do you write that? Right, this is the chi-square part, equals the sum of the
Expected minus the expected squared.
Is that what you're telling me? Yes. Now, would you be given that for your exam, this equation? Yes. The key thing is knowing how to use it. Okay? And so take your data, take what you observe, what you expect, do the math, and then the key number, you remember when we looked at the paper that the College Board will give you, they give you the cutoff mark at 5%. So if your number is big, it is what? Whenever your number is big, you know that it is what? Significant. If it's smaller, it's going to be insignificant. And our cutoff is at 5%. They give you the significant number. So if it's anything smaller than that, then you know it is what? You're not worried about it. Yeah. Okay. Now, the only thing you have to think about is degrees of freedom. If you are doing a chi-square test, you have to at least, if you're doing a chi-square test, you have to have at least what? Two items that you're comparing. So you would have how many degrees of freedom? 1. If you're comparing 3 things, you would have 2 degrees of freedom. Okay? So that's how you decide your degrees of freedom. And we have a whole lecture on how to use that chi-square, so you can review that. I have that on YouTube if you're not sure how to do that. Okay, that was chapter 1. What was chapter 2 about? Atoms, right? So things that we learned there, what types of things did we learn? We learned about why atoms bond with other atoms, right? So we talked about how to fill up the number of energy levels with the electrons, right? And we said it was all dependent on what electrons, the way one atom reacts with another one. It's dependent on the number of what? Valence electrons. And then we talked about ways to get happy, right? And all of the bonds that are out there are ways for that atom to be stable. And we compared ionic bonds and covalent bonds and hydrogen bonds. There are other ones out there, van der Waals. We're not worried about that. Write this down, okay? There's hydrogen bonds, ionic bonds, and covalent bonds. What else did we learn in that chapter? That's where we learned the properties of water, right? Yeah. And we already have an essay on that. What else did we learn in that chapter? pH, right? Was that what you were going to say?
I was going to say ions and isotopes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Ions and isotopes. What's the difference between an ion and an isotope? In isotope, you vary the number of neutrons. And an ion is when you vary the number of electrons. Good. Okay, so that's chapter 2. Then chapter 3, we talked about the important organic molecules. And we already went all over those, right? But we talked about something at the beginning. And that is how we can use monomers to make what? Polymers. So there was 2 reactions we want to be familiar with. What are those 2 reactions? Dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis. And how water is used, right? In dehydration synthesis, you're removing water to make a polymer. And in hydrolysis, you're using water to what? Break them up. So you would know that. That's the only thing I didn't ask an essay on. Chapter 4, what did we learn about in chapter 4? We learned about the differences between what and what? What was the first thing we learned about? Prokaryotic cells and, I don't know what I'm writing, eukaryotic cells, exactly. So I would want to know the difference between those two. Okay, what are some things I would see in a prokaryotic cell? I wouldn't see in any membrane enclosed organelles for sure. And where the DNA is, what do we call that? Nucleoid region, right? Do they have ribosomes? Yes. Do they have cell membranes? Yes. Do they have any mitochondria? No. Okay. So you could tell me And the reason why I'm having you study like this is look at the big ticket items we talked about, because if I don't ask an essay question on it, chances are I'm gonna have to ask a what question on it? Multiple choice. So when you practice writing and anticipating essays, you think, okay, maybe she's gonna ask us the difference between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. When you write that out, how are they the same? You could do like a Venn diagram, right? Where they cross over in the middle is where they're the same, and then on either side is where they're different. When you create something like that and force your brain to shift through the material, it doesn't matter if I write you an essay, ask an essay question over it, or I ask you a multiple choice question on it. Your brain's already processed it, and you're more likely to give me the right answer. Do you see the difference between that and memorizing somebody else's essay that they've written out? Those of you that sit there and go, oh man, she could write an essay about that, I should do that. I should do that, I should do that. It doesn't matter what kind of question I ask you. If it's a short answer or a long answer, you'll be able to support it because you've already done the work. So you could do the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. You could tell me, like, what do you think are the 5 top organelles, like you can't live without them? If we were talking about the eukaryotic cell, what would be the 5 top organelles? Like, if I don't have this organelle, life is over. What are some that you would pick? Yeah.
Nucleus.
I'd pick the nucleus. You made that claim. Could you tell me why the nucleus is so important? Justify it to me. Go ahead. Justify it to me.
Because it controls the entire cell.
Controls the entire cell using what? DNA. So we have one important organelle. What's another critical organelle that you would want? Did you? Okay, go ahead.
Mitochondria.
Okay. Why do we have to have mitochondria? For what process? Cellular respiration, all your energy. See what I'm saying? I didn't put that up there on there as a potential essay, but by you having to go through and place value, like, oh, of all the organelles, this is the most important. That helps you to know it. What are the least important ones? Now, could there be opinion and all of that? Sure, but by the process of you justifying why you're choosing your answer, you're learning that material. Okay, and then that takes us to the end. Questions or concerns you want to ask me? Yes.
Will there be specific time limits, like for the multiple choice
Yes.
essays?
Yes. You have, because that's how it is when you take your AP exam. You have time limits on how long you have for each one. And I will tell you, for some of you, you'll be fine. But for some of you, the essay part and that time limit can really mess you up. And this is why you'll focus on one question, you'll worry about it and dither over it, and then you won't have time for the rest of them. So this is where you have to be super disciplined. The clock's up on the wall, and if I say, okay, you have 35 minutes for your essays, then you want to be halfway through after about 15 minutes. Do you agree with me on that? And you put a line on there, like go halfway through the paper and say, 9:05, I have to be done with these. This much. And if I'm not, I'm going to go on anyway and do the remaining ones. And give yourself 5 minutes to read it over at the end and make any corrections. Yes?
Will the multiple choice questions, will it be on clickers or?
Yeah, clickers, but you have a hard copy, so you can work at your own pace. And you'll also write down answers on an answer sheet so that you can go back and look and say, okay, does it match? Is that what I want? Because you have more. I usually ask 25 multiple choice questions, and those are two points each. So that'll be 50. And then on the essay, you have 50 points, so that's a total of 100. So if you think I'm asking 25 questions, how many chapters are there? There were 4 chapters, right? How many times is 4 going to 25? Okay, so 4 times 5 is 20, right? Okay. 4 times 6 is what? 24. So one chapter I might ask an extra question on. So think about it. I mean, I only have maybe 6 questions on that whole chapter. I'm not going to be able to ask you about everything. And when you take the AP exam, they won't ask you about everything either. That's why you have to know it all, right? So that the 6 questions I happen to ask you, you know the answer to on that particular chapter. Yes?
On the essays, I know it should be well written, but are you grading like it's an English essay, like it's a science?
Okay, so sometimes I do grade hard like that, but for the most part, what I have you do is state content and support it. And you are going to need to write incomplete sentences for the AP exam. But I'm trying to get a snapshot of whether you know that. And to be perfectly honest, it's a lot faster for me to grade if I just have you make bullets or numbered lists. So you will do a lot of that for me just because I have a lot of grading that I do between your labs and your essays. But at any given time, I could also have you write it as a full paragraph, you know. You don't want to get caught up in the way you've been taught to write essays where you need an opening, you know, like you're writing facts and supporting, making a statement and supporting. And one thing you always want to remember, and there won't be a ton of it in this first test, if you use a word that's not part of your normal vernacular, you better tell me what that word means, right? So like when we learn osmosis or diffusion or something, if there's some word, prokaryotic, not a lot of you sit around with your friends and say, oh, were you prokaryotic today? That's awesome. I was eukaryotic. Okay, you don't talk like that. So if it's a word that we use, a scientific term, one of the terms you used in your homework, make sure you define that term for me. Would I spend a bunch of time memorizing it verbatim how it is in your book? No, I would not. Just a short little definition so I know that you know what that term means. Yes? Yes, spelling counts in the fact that if you won't have, you're welcome, sweetheart, you won't have a dictionary when you're taking that, and you don't want to have misspelled words, especially if they're biological terms.
Don't misspell? So like, it's like very important not to.
I think I answered your question. Okay, you'll have to decide what kind of student you want to be. Yes?
You need a calculator on the test?
You do. But I have those ones in the back. If you want to bring in your own simple calculator, if it's a 5-function calculator, you can. But those are the ones you'll be using on the AP exam. So I recommend, I usually make you just use those. Yeah. Okay, what else? Okay, when am I going to see you again? Wednesday's your exam, but when's our next review session? Tuesday. So here's the deal, my friends. You get all your studying done over this weekend, okay? Tonight, if you know you're going away this weekend, but you're not leaving tonight, even though you're tired and it's Friday, get some work done, okay? Make sure those essays are written and potential essays are written. You want to be all perfectly studied up, so Tuesday, when we're in here and just going over things, you know, oh, I need her to go over this, I need her to go over this, I don't understand this, hope she clarifies this. If I ask questions, you're like, I know it, I know it, I know it, and that builds confidence. So set your goal to be completely done studying by Monday night. And then Tuesday night will just be bonus. So you walk in strong on Wednesday morning. Okay? Make that commitment to yourself. You want to start out strong. Yes?
I forgot my question.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? All right. Okay. Have a great week and be safe. Yes?
Will there be any information
That I use it more of support. If it's something I really want you to know, I'm going to cover it in our group shared notes. I don't expect you to or it's in the highly suggested reading and thinking. Central. That's where it'll be.
Central. Yes, no, right.
I hope you're studying hard. I know you'll do a great job.